Good day, everybody. My name is Arik Johnson. I'm the founder and chairman of Aurora Worldwide Development Corporation, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Aurora's been doing webinars for a long time, probably 15 years or so, and the gentleman who's with me here on the webinar, Mr. David Conley, the principal at InnomationCorp, has been on several of these over the years. Dave's an old friend of mine. We met for the first time in late 2009 in Rome at a SCIP conference over there. Where he was presenting on something that I was just completely drawn into called trees, T-R-I-Z, and he'll touch on some of these ideas here for us today. But Dave, say hello before I rattle on.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well, and thanks for joining us today.
Hopefully you can see Dave there, and he's coming through loud and clear, and the audio is working well. The webinar format for today is a little different than most of the webinars that some of you may have participated in the past. We have a long-running series called the Intelligence Collaborative, or Intel Collab, which actually we're going to be bringing back soon out of mothballs with a little bit of a twist on it. We put it away a couple of years ago in order to get through our rebranding, and now that that's out of the way, I think we have a new purpose for it. So stay tuned for that. But you should see on your screen that this is the first of 4 preview webinars to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing at our RECONVERGE G2 2020 meeting. 2020 is going to be held here in Madison, Wisconsin, which is our headquarters, and it'll be April 21st through the 23rd, so tickets are still available for that. Dave has presented at all of those meetings. I just found out. We were talking about it, and Mr. Conley has been a presenter or faculty leader at every single one of our G2 meetings, which will now be the 9th one, and its 9th incarnation in 2020. So Dave and I have a long background. Some of the material he's going to be sharing here with you today is derived from a collaboration that we're actually working on together with the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just down the road from us. Milwaukee is one of those cities here in America that's trying to figure out how artificial intelligence and machine learning will be impacting its local industries and community, its population, how its education systems and scientific community will have to adapt to these incarnations. And so as part of that, Aurora is working very closely with the Chamber of Commerce there and the Economic Development Authority to try and do some of that forecasting together around economic development. Dave happens to be the contractor who won the bid to do the technology forecasting portion of that. And so some of the materials you'll see here is a part of that output. The first of these webinars is today. They will continue every Wednesday throughout the month of March, so 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern. Come back here, you'll see a registration link on there. If you get kind of the syntax of that URL, it's core.vc/webinar, and then the year, month, and date in descending order. Plug that in, and you can sign up to join all of these. The other webinar guest, by the way, I'll be having on throughout the month will be Dr. Craig Fleischer. He'll be on with us on Wednesday, March 11th, so precisely 168 hours from now. Craig and I will be on here talking about programming growth strategy. Then in 2 weeks from today, we'll have Mr. Tim Smith, our Director of Competitive Simulations, in other words, wargaming, will be on to talk about how to test your strategy in a market simulation. And then the final webinar before we sort of send you guys off to do your homework ahead of coming to Madison will be on the 25th, and that'll be around scenario forecasting and narrative development and design. And the way we've structured the conference this year is really designed around teams. We really want you to send a team from your company or organization to join us in Madison. We've got a limit of 20 of those teams. A little over half of those tickets are sold. So if you have any interest in coming to Madison at the end of April, I suggest you buy a ticket. Visit reconverge.net, and you'll see the URL there at the bottom /agenda-2020 for further details on that. But it's really a 3-day conference where we take you through developing that scenario for the future of your business. The Wednesday will then be really led by Dave and taking you through the trends of engineering system evolution to demonstrate how these effects of AI and machine learning will affect that scenario and your growth strategy. And then on Thursday, we've really created some new tradecraft around how to do war games where the teams aren't competing with each other. And you'll learn more about that on the 18th when we have Tim on. But without further delay, I want to turn this over to Dave so Dave can talk us through some of the ideas that he's going to be sharing on the Wednesday, April 22nd in particular. But really, this is a very integrative experience for RECONVERGE G2 2020. We've decided to eliminate the formal evening activities. For those of you who've joined us in prior years, don't worry, we'll still be having a really, really good time every night. We are at the Fluno Center on UW-Madison's University campus, which happens to be right across the street from Karaoke Kid, which is the diviest dive bar in Madison. You don't have to go there every night with me, but I will be there every night. Dave will be there as well. I believe, Dave, our duet is, our special duet is All My Exes Live in Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
It has been in the past.
Has been in the past, and if you don't want to miss that, you better come to Madison at the end of next month. So Dave, by the way, Dave, I forgot to even introduce you. Dave started your career in the Air Force, if I don't remember incorrectly, and your last stop before you went into business for yourself with InnomationCorp, doing engineering, system modeling, design, and all of the stuff that goes on around creating, you know, innovative businesses and business models, was at Intel Corporation, where I think you were there for 17 years, the last 7 of which
that's
was head of the Worldwide Innovation Council. So with that introduction, feel free to fill in any blanks of what I missed. I'm going to go offline and let you take over from here. And oh, one last thing. Submit your questions in the question panel. We're going to address them at the end of Dave's remarks. We're not going to break into his presentation in order to go through questions. So hit him with some zingers, please, because he deserves it, number one, and he's capable. He can answer pretty much any question you come up with. So I'm going to go offline. Dave, you take it from here, brother.
Great. Arik, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and thanks for the discussion. And again, I'm looking very much forward to going to the G2 event again in April. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about the use of what are called the trends of engineering system evolution to understand the future of our artificial intelligence and machine learning, and understand how we can apply that to your organizations. I'm going to give you a taste of it, and this is a full day event at the G2 conference. We will be taking the information that we've gained over the past couple of months on doing a very in-depth analysis on how artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to change in the future. And in relation to your problems, your business plans, your issues, we're going to look at what the opportunities and threats are that AI and ML present to you so you can be prepared to move forward into the future with confidence. So let's get started. As mentioned, artificial intelligence and machine learning is here, and it's not going away. It's going to become larger and larger. This provides huge both opportunities and threats to every single business, but understanding those in advance allows us to be prepared. And the G2 2020 conference is going to help us do that. Now let's explore a little bit about exactly how that's going to happen at the G2 conference. Now we're going to step back a little bit and just talk about general problem solving, because all problem solving happens in the same way. So I want us to kind of ground on that, and we'll talk about then what this method looks like in relation to the general problem solving process that every one of you use now, even if you don't understand that you're using it. A process flow of general problem solving is you start off with a non-specific problem. You have an issue to solve. We won't go into the details of what those may look like now, but we will look at one example in this presentation. You then take this non-specific problem and you simplify it into something that you can work with and focus on. You then take and you generalize that problem. You then use some kind of solving operator to produce a general solution. And then you specify, or in other words, turn it into a specific solution. Now, clearly all this is somewhat esoteric and vague, so let's start putting a little bit of meat on the bones. These first two steps are basically tangible real-world problem identification steps. These are issues that come at you in the real world and are defined in real-world terminology, defining real-world systems. And these are tangible items. These are problem modeling tools that are tangible. Then when we step up to the general problem, we have now entered an intangible world, but we're still defining your problem in an abstraction of some type. We then step over and produce an intangible, abstract solution of your problem. And finally, we step back into the real world by turning your abstract, intangible solutions into tangible, real-world solutions. Now, we just talked about these abstractions, which at first can sound a little strange. However, we use them all the time. General mathematics is an abstraction tool, for instance, for physics, statistics, finance, whatever. Mathematics is an abstraction. Chemistry, formulations, reaction formulas, and so forth, these are abstractions. And in innovation, we use multiple abstraction tools. We use things called contradictions, substance field modeling, and the technical trend continuums, or the trends of engineering system evolution. That is the tool that we are using for the prediction of artificial intelligence and machine learning. As Arik alluded to, we are in work right now with the city of Milwaukee, their economic development region, to help forecast what AI and ML is going to do so that they can prepare themselves for the future for both those opportunities and threats. Now you may think, well, what about, just, Milwaukee? Well, certainly we're focusing, because they are the client, on the specific impacts and opportunities to Milwaukee. However, these impacts are going to be globally felt. So what we are analyzing in Milwaukee are going to affect all regions. Okay, now we go back to this general problem solving flow of non-specific problem to simplified problem to general problem, general solution, and specific solution. So let's break this down a little bit. In relation to this very specific analysis of what artificial intelligence and machine learning impacts will be on the Milwaukee region, we start off with a non-specific problem. For instance, for strategic planning purposes, it is important to understand how AI and ML will impact the region. This is a non-specific problem that doesn't give us enough detail to actually analyze it. We have to rearrange this or simplify this problem in order to be able to do so. So a simplification is, we need to understand the current and future states of AI and ML. Oh, that makes sense. If we know the current state and we have the proper tools to understand the future states, then this is a simplified problem to help us understand what the impacts are on the economic region. So we need to capture, first of all, the current state of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and establish those on what are called trend continuums. And these are various aspects, and we'll look at this in a second, but we're going to deconstruct artificial intelligence and machine learning into basic constructs and put them on various trend continuums to understand where we are now and then where we will be in the future. Again, these are abstractions. So we're going to progress these various aspects of AI and ML down these various trend progressions. And don't worry, I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like. And then we will say, this is what these various constructs are going to look like in the future. And then finally, we'll visualize what these abstract constructs look like in the real world and produce visualizations, if you will, of what these new construct states will enable, be applied to, be able to produce, etc. Now, again, the first step is to simplify this problem into a general problem statement. Then we are going to put these ideas onto these trend continuums and progress them down the continuums, and then finally turn these into specific real-world results that we can relate to and deal with. Okay, how did we simplify this problem into a general problem? Well, on February 12th and 13th, we held several meetings in Milwaukee where we took AI and ML experts, and through a series of basic, somewhat questionnaires that I put together, it was, I forgot, 200 and something line items, going and understanding the current state of artificial intelligence and machine learning now. In other words, establishing a base point or a starting point for what artificial intelligence and machine learning, basically how it's manifested in our economic environment currently. So that work was already gathered to produce a general problem, which is the current state of AI and ML. Then I, as the trending expert and systematic innovation expert, took this information, I placed it on various trend lines. Again, I will show you in a bit what that looks like. And then I theoretically progressed these various constructs of artificial intelligence and machine learning down these various trend lines to these future states. Now, let me give you an example of what that looks like. I keep talking about these trends. Well, this is an overall trend map of the 11 related trends, the very top being the trend of S-curve evolution, the very first one being the trend of increasing dynamization. All of these trends, these 10, work together to drive different aspects of any system through what's called an S-curve. Now, we're not going to go into each of these in much detail, but we are going to talk about what some of these look like and how they work together in order to give us an excellent view of the future. These trends are based on a worldwide study over the past 85 years of around 4.5 million patents to understand how successful systems, and when I say, I mean like commercially successful systems in the marketplace, how they change over time. And you can apply these abstract trends to any system to very accurately predict what's coming in the future. So let's look at the trend of increasing dynamization, a small example in relation to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Here we're looking at one trend, the trend of increasing dynamization, and by the way, as you guessed, there are multiple sub-trends on many of these. Sub-trend 4 is called functional dynamization, which basically means that systems go from single systems to dual systems to triple systems and keep moving up in total number of functions provided. You can think about a camera or a phone, and then a phone with a music player, right? And then an MP3 system. The examples I gave here were basically different aspects of competing systems: radio plus MP3, and streaming. What is the next level? And your smartphone has done the same thing, from a phone, then a phone plus a camera, then a phone plus a camera and an internet device, and then a phone plus a camera and an internet device and a security device that allows you to open and control things within your own home, etc. So, in relation to the output of artificial intelligence and machine learning systems, specifically the system to the machine, all AI and ML systems have to control some machine, whether it's simply a monitor for the purpose of communicating with a human, or actually working things like valves and or cancer treatment lasers or whatever. That would be the machine, the system being the AI ML system. We're looking at the output specifically. So current state says it's basically a single system, meaning most AI ML outputs, and this again, system to machine, likely affect one type of machine, assuming the output is a single or a multi-homogeneous signal. So in other words, most systems are affecting one other system. So this AI ML system that we're talking about, whatever it may be, is very likely affecting one machine with one signal output ultimately, or a group of single homogeneous, I should say multiple homogeneous signals. So basically parallel similar signals affecting very similar machines like multiple monitors. Now, the way this works is you can progress things down and say, what would it look like if we had dual signal output or triple signal output? Or you can just jump all the way to the end to get a big viewpoint of where we're headed. What would it look like with multiple function output? So my progression says, expect AI and ML systems to affect a wide variety of other AI ML systems where this, quote, same input from each actually results in different functional effects onto those systems. So in other words, you may have an AI ML system which will send out signals that are the same signals, but the next series AI ML system that's taking that input will use that input differently. Also, expect that these systems will begin creating heterogeneous signals, of course, different kinds of signals that can be used to activate a variety of other AI ML systems as well as a variety of machines. So we're going from a situation now where AI and ML systems basically produce one kind of signal that affects one kind of machine, end of story. In the future, we're going to see AI ML systems that are highly networked with other AI ML systems, just almost like humans working in an organization, giving each other information and doing the next step of analyses, and also where they affect multiple kinds of machines. Like you can imagine an AI ML system that helps run a smart city and controls cameras, traffic signals, emergency responders, you name it. Now, we're still talking about this analysis of trying to predict the future of AI and ML. I just showed you one example of how that applies across one construct, the output of a system, system to machine output. We then will take, once we have all of these constructs looked at across all these various trends and their subtrends, we then have to turn those into real world situations. Let's look at an example of that. Let's look at the trend of increasing completeness of system components. So a couple of items that we've seen out of this analysis. One current state is that most AI ML systems utilize substantial human oversight in the way they work. Tons of human babysitting to make these things do what they need to. The trend of increasing system completeness says, as AI and ML systems evolve, human decisions around what the system should focus on and what to do with the output will shift away from the humans. Interesting. The AI ML systems will start figuring out what to do on their own. And I don't mean one night in the lab while the professor's away, they're going to turn into this monster. They will be developed to where they can go and find problems to solve and then decide what's the best thing to do with the information that they create. Another current state is the selection, the cleaning, and the tagging of the data that goes into these systems is basically driven by humans right now and is very expensive. Again, applying the same trend of increasing system completeness tells us in the near future, all data selection, cleaning, and tagging will be accomplished by the system, not by humans. Now, this does not mean that all three of these, selection, cleaning, and tagging, will happen simultaneously, but all of them will eventually be handled by the machine, or I should say, the system itself. Now let's jump up and look at the trend of increasing value, which is directly related to the trend of S-curve evolution. in relation to what we just talked about. Very closely related, we look at these various stages of the S-curve and the functional and cost requirements in order for systems to move through these S-curves. So, initial state, systems to ID and acquire target data, are likely rudimentary and need substantial improvement and cost reduction. We need substantial improvement and cost reduction in order for these systems that will acquire their own targets and therefore target data. What do you mean by target data? Well, if you have a sensor that's actually like reading I should say thermal temperatures on a corn crop to help predict through artificial intelligence when what the yield of that crop and the harvest date will be. This could be target data. You could also be going door to door and taking survey data of people's ages, education levels, et cetera, that can also be target data. Right now, systems that ID and pull their own target data, and I mean systems, not humans, are rare and very rudimentary and need to increase in their functionality and reduce in their costs in order to move into stage 2 and become commercially viable. Okay, so now super systems, human first and then system driven, that are to set goals, objectives, and variables and to find targets, gather data, and curate that data, will improve rapidly, allowing substantial profits from those products and services. These improvements may or may not happen in unison, nor in the order implied. But in other words, first, very effective human systems to target and gather and curate data to be fed into artificial intelligence and machine learning machines. Those will first come to be, and then machines will be developed to do the same thing. This will be a huge boon to the artificial intelligence community, or I should say industry, and will greatly increase the value of the output of those systems onto our society. Okay, let's jump to another concept called the trend of transition to the super system. Again, current state, AI and ML systems are mostly standalone systems, though coordinated with other systems, such as a Google search engine with AI support. The trend of transition to the super system tells us that these AI and ML systems will be fully integrated into many other machines, such as automobiles and manufacturing tools. Down the road, you're going to be driving a car that has an AI ML system in it that is reading information that it gathers as you drive along and makes intelligent decisions, not only for the efficient operation of your car, but also for your personal benefit, for your personal safety, etc. Another current state, most AI ML systems are substantially independent and work within themselves. They're basically standalone systems. Again, the trend of transition to the super system tells us that these specialized AI ML systems, example, a specialized system could be data curation, could be neural networking, could be iteration feedback control, could be output management and control. These will enter the market and greatly increase the value of AI ML. In other words, we're going to start segmenting off subcomponents or sub-process steps of artificial intelligence and machine learning into people who can focus on making those parts excellent, thus making the big picture excellent. So it may be that you go and buy all your data already curated for your AI ML analysis from a service that does data curation, and that service will probably start off being human driven, and finally they will curate data through mechanical, or I should say machine systems. Arik, that wraps it up, and if I can hand it back over to you, if you'd like to talk a little bit about the conference, and I really appreciate everyone's time.
So you just kind of blew my mind there at the end. If you can go back to that last slide for just a second, because
Sure.
You probably surfaced about a $10 billion market opportunity there that I'm not sure
Yeah.
anybody else has thought of. Can you tell me a little more about that? And obviously, everybody listening in, this is a preview of some of the things that we're going to talk about at the G2 meeting, obviously, at the end of next month. But what you just said has so much value wrapped up into it and so much certainty, predictability, I think, that I just want you to repeat what you just said there about the
Sure.
curation service.
Okay, yeah. What I just said is that right now, artificial intelligence and machine learning systems basically are self-contained units, and it's kind of like you go and you buy your artificial intelligence and machine learning package from Tandy Corp or whatever, and you got to go home and figure out how to make it work. You got to feed your AI and ML data into it and figure out what to do with the output, etc. In the future, various process steps across the artificial intelligence and machine learning platforms will start being highly focused and highly specialized, thus increasing their value to the overall analysis substantially, thus making it so people can sell it to you, such as already curated data, a neural networking system that blows yours out of the water, so you can run that data you just bought through their neural network, and then you take the output and decide what to do with it. And how do we know this is going to happen? Because it happens throughout history forever. Think about when automobiles hit the market, and you would go to Ford, and they did everything in relation to that automobile. They made it, they sold it to you, you took it home, you drove it. And then somebody started making better carburetors. Somebody started having a car wash machine that you could take your car to. Somebody else started making custom parts for it. They started focusing in areas that would be valuable to you, to take it away from a single system or a single business system into a network of business systems that make that entire network or overall system much more valuable than when it was basically a standalone unit.
So it's really the ecosystem that evolves out of the individual point solutions that AI and machine learning is currently focused on, because it's inevitable in order to produce enough value for the marketplace to absorb it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you could say something like, I would say Google and some other companies like that are in the best place to like own the whole market. And
Yep.
clearly they've been thinking about this for a while. They better be darn good at data curation, because if they're not, someone's going to come take that part of the business away from them.
Hear that, Google? Mark Zuckerberg, are you listening? That's amazing. So once again, go to the next slide so I can promote the meeting a little bit. Here again, I'm the salesman on this call today. That is a very sweet sample, I think, of what you're going to get in Madison in about 6 weeks. And by the way, I don't know if they're still recruiting for the workshops for next week or not, but if you are interested and happen to be in Milwaukee next week and want to meet Dave in person, send me an email. I put my email address into the chat panel. Send me an email and I'll forward your interest on to the folks who are in charge of those invitations, and who knows, maybe you can join us. But you definitely can join us in Madison, April 21st through the 23rd. If you visit reconverge.net/agenda-2020, it's also on our Twitter, and we've been putting it on LinkedIn and stuff, all of those links. Dave's going to be there. Dave is one of, I'll say, probably a half a dozen or so kind of lead faculty who are going to be taking us through this exploration. And really, this is one subset of the overall experience. And I'll linger for just a second here in my salesman role, and then we'll cut to questions, because there's a lot of them, Dave. And so
bring them on.
Yeah, so the way this experience is going to run is you're going to be assigned, your team will be assigned an Aurora concierge, somebody from our team, who will make sure that you're ready when your feet hit the ground in Madison. So when you come to Madison and arrive at the meeting at 8 a.m. on April 21st, you're going to come in equipped with two things. you're going to have two competing scenario narratives, one of which is a utopian scenario narrative affecting your business, the business that you work for now or the one that you want to model through the workshop. The second will be a dystopian scenario narrative, and all of these will be developed in advance of you coming to the meeting. So there is pre-work that will need to be done for us to take advantage of the very scarce face time that we'll have together while we're in Madison at the same time. That first day, the yield from that first day, the intelligence yield from that first day, will be a hybridized most probable scenario. So you're going to take the utopia and the dystopia that are polarized against one another for how your business is going to have to operate in the future, your organization, and then you're going to hybridize that into a most probable, and you're going to begin constructing your growth strategy. And the growth strategy will be really how you're offering, your business model will assemble various offers or products, services, and combinations of the two to meet market demand and market expectations in this new scenario. So you're literally, by the end of that day, going to walk out of the room, hopefully exhausted and ready for some karaoke with me and Dave. You're going to walk out of that first day with this hybridized scenario and the beginnings of a growth strategy. We'll talk more about that in a week. The next webinar will be programming growth strategy, and we'll get into the concepts of superiority criteria, the satisfiers, drivers, and disruptors that the market will reward with share, and the dynamics of how all that works. We'll be looking also at control factors, which those of you from the doctrinaire CI, MI, SI world may refer to more commonly as kits and kicks. We've reinterpreted that as control factors, the factors you control, the factors no one controls, and the factors that others control that you have to influence. And then by the end of that first day, we hope to send you home quite satisfied, but hopefully exhausted. You come back the next day, and then Dave is going to take you through a number of lessons, guiding you through a number of lessons around how these trends of engineering system evolution affecting artificial intelligence and machine learning are now going to affect your business. How will these things change that most probable scenario in ways that create both risk and reward? And then you're going to have to adapt that scenario, or rather your growth strategy, to that set of lessons. Dave, you want to get a word in?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. I always like to make analogies because it kind of helps us. Humans learn by comparing things that they hear to things they already know. So let's act like it's the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. The telephone is just coming on the market. You have a business where you sell products to local farmers, who knows. Basically, we're going to say, hey, there's this thing called the telephone coming. How can you use that to improve your business? And if you don't, and competitors do, how are they going to use it to destroy your business? So basically, we're going to take AI and ML and apply it to your business models to help you think through how you can benefit from that and the threats that it produces that you need to prep for and position yourself so that they don't hurt you.
Very well said, Dave. So imagine yourself 100 years ago looking at how the telephone will change the world of business and the economy. That's what
it changed it a little bit, and that's just a telephone.
Just a smidge, yeah.
And that's nothing compared to what we're seeing now.
Exactly. This will be much, much bigger. So then at the end of Wednesday, as you toddle off to karaoke with me and Dave, we hope to have you through the process of absorbing all of these trends of engineering system evolution for AI and ML on that growth strategy. And your growth strategy will then be put to the test on Thursday. Thursday, April 23rd is the competitive simulation. We have a number of very, how should I put it, experienced and brutal competitive intelligence analysts, some of my best friends, who will be in the room helping us to subject your growth strategy to the deep indifference of the marketplace in terms of how you intend to win. The market will determine superiority criteria throughout the week as the week evolves. And when you show up on Thursday morning, your growth strategy is going to have to try and survive 2 rounds of the market's very deep indifference to whatever you've got planned. We believe that this new format will put your growth strategy both to the test as well as your forecasting abilities to the test, and we will send you home with a much less failure-prone and frail plan for whatever company you're from. By the way, we've had to create some new tradecraft around the simulation in order to do this. I guarantee you've never experienced a war game like this before because we just invented it. It's brand new. Nobody's ever done it before. I know that Dave, you are as excited by things that no one's ever done before as I am.
That's my favorite.
That's right. We better hop to the questions now. Again, visit reconverge.net. Buy your ticket now. I hope that we sell out as a result of this. And you guys, if you can't come to Madison, you can download the mobile app and observe online. But I guarantee you'll wish you'd been there.
Hey,
So
and
Dave,
let me say one more thing before we jump to question. If you don't know what AI and ML are, don't worry about it. 2 months ago, I barely knew. And I've learned a lot. We're going to help you understand it. You're going to start. The reason I use the telephone examples, we all know what a telephone is. We don't all know what AI and ML really is. We hear those words, but we don't really understand what it means. Yeah. Don't worry, you're going to understand it when you leave, and don't worry if you don't understand it now. That is not a requirement to attend this meeting and get maximum benefit. Thanks.
That's right. Don't let your naivete hold you back, because I promise, Dave and I will be a lot smarter then too, incidentally. So a bunch of questions. I'm going to address the one that I think is probably common to everyone. Doug Barton, thank you for asking this so early on in the presentation. Will the presentation be made available following the webinar? Yes. In fact, we're recording this and we plan to post this both publicly as well as to you guys. In particular, you're going to get an email probably tomorrow morning with a link where you can review this. We encourage you to share the webinar. Please feel free to share this with everybody you think might get something out of it and enjoy. And then obviously come to Madison if I haven't said that often enough. I have a question here from one of my old friends from the Intel Collab days, Justin Souls from Canada. It's kind of long, so I'm going to read the whole thing, Dave, and then you feel free to take it, start wherever you want, and go ahead with this. In terms of your problem-solving process, when you move from a non-specific to a specific problem, is it possible to have multiple generalized specific problems? In other words, A, we need to understand the current and future states of machine learning. B, we need to understand what the technological strengths and weaknesses of Milwaukee is as a region. C, etc.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yes, very good question and spot on. I think you already knew the answer before you ask it. Not that you're just trying to string us along or something, but yes, there are multiple ways to specify a question. And those various specifications have to do with the goals of your project. What are you trying to do? And of course, when we're discussing in a webinar like this, we have to give some kind of cut of the situation, and we can't say, oh, and then we came up with 15 specific problems to solve, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, a non-specific problem can be cut into, well, and if it's like something like Intel dealing with production problems in its fabs, there could be 80 specific problems to go address, and you have to decide which ones need to be addressed in what order and what are your business objectives for the whole problem solving process in the first place.
Not that you ever actually did that in the real world or anything.
Oh yeah, we did it a lot.
Very good. Thanks, Justin. Keep them coming. Jonathan Dennett, also a fellow Canadian, asked a question very earlier on. What was the study that you mentioned about the 80-year study around patents? Can you be a little more specific about what that was about?
Yes, I can. So this all comes from something called TRIZ, which is a TRIZ, a Romanized acronym for a Russian phrase, which is, Arik?
Teoria решения изобретательских задач.
Which means the theory of inventive problem solving. And this was done in the Soviet Union right after the Second World War. And it started by analyzing worldwide patents to understand how technically challenging problems were solved. And we saw an abstraction, if you will, in how all problems are solved if they can be categorized into certain groupings. Within this study, which was basically from the worldwide patent database, they also started seeing patterns in the way technical systems change. And again, I should say commercially successful changes that have been captured in the worldwide patent database. So this is through TRIZ, T-R-I-Z, pointing you to this collection of 4.5 million patents. I can't do, but that is the construct in which this analysis happened. And if you want to learn more about it, go and study Altshuler and TRIZ, T-R-I-Z.
And I'll just make mention that I believe you might have written a book or three about it, and you have one that it goes into some detail on that. And reach out to Dave to buy one of those books, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks.
My old buddy Dale Cooper is on here. He asked about the order of the trends. Does it matter what order you examine the trends in?
No, the order of examination is irrelevant. The order of how they affect each other was on that chart I showed you, and basically you can see arrows going from one box to the other. So you can consider them to be sub-trends of each other if a trend points into another one, but you don't have to examine them in any order. But if you're examining one that has other trends feeding it, you can get more understanding about that trend by going to its sub-trends, but the order is irrelevant.
Yep, good.
Good, great questions.
Yep, great question, Dale. Keep them coming. Terrence Moore, you asked, can small business owners benefit from using AI? Can nonprofits benefit from using AI?
Absolutely, and I think this is, and I'm not saying this to be snarky or anything. It's kind of like asking back at the end of the 1800s if you could benefit from using the telephone. It's going to get so huge and so well integrated. We don't realize it, but Google uses a ton of AI to help understand what you're asking for and to help you search for things on the internet and to do language translations and to do spelling check. I mean, on and on and on. You don't realize how much of this is already in the background of what you are already doing. And so in many ways, if you're doing search functions within your business, you're already using it. And so, yes, it's going to get to the point where it's going to be much more important for every single business, which is why we're focusing this year at G2 on this topic. It's coming. Get ready to use it.
I guess a better question almost, Terrence, would be, could you survive without it?
For a while.
Yeah. I guess that's something
I can't define what a while means.
Right. By the way, Dave and I became friends and really bonded over the fact that the TRIZ system is very, very predictable. In fact, I would say perfectly predictable. And the thing that TRIZ lacks or can't tell you, and the thing that really sort of got me excited about it, was that the intelligence world, strategic marketing, competitive intelligence, can be very complementary to what the trends of engineering system evolution can predict. So they can predict pretty much everything except for who's going to do it and when. And that's where we come in as intelligence people, is we've got the ability to do those types of forecasts. And so for the first time really at G2 2020, we're going to be merging those two and sort of taking the best of both worlds and giving people a peek inside this crystal ball.
And real quick, let me comment a little bit more on that last question. Don't think, oh my gosh, we are hosed. We have to use AI and ML. We don't know anything about that, or we're sunk. Trust me, services are going to pop up on the market that you can go buy. Just like I don't have to do my own security scans on my laptop, Norton charges me $3 a month to do it. I don't have to be a security scan expert to use security on my laptop. You're not going to have to be an AI ML expert to build it into your business model. There will be people who will sell you that service.
That's really well said. And I think, to the point of when you concluded your presentation, we went to Q&A, the thing that struck me was there's an almost infinite entrepreneurial ecosystem opportunity here around AI and ML specifically to create those services that essentially fix and augment the things that are not yet good enough or have not yet reached a point of improvable performance where there's market demand that can absorb it. And
Yeah,
that's a
your
big
high schools, your high school kids and your college kids that, right now they're going to be selling us this stuff in the next 5 years.
Yep.
They're
To that
they're
point,
going
by
to
the
own
way,
that. They're going to own that ecosystem, and they're going to make money off of it.
yep. And then, in fact, my eldest is about to be a high school senior next year, and I'm sort of gently nudging him in the direction of AI and robotics as a potential future career path. So,
Yeah.
so Edwin asked a little while ago about the next webinar. Hey, great question. He unfortunately can't make it, but is there an alternative day? Unfortunately, there's not an alternative day to join us live and in person. However, there is a link in the chat panel. It's core.vc/webinar 2020-0311 for those of you who can keep track of that, but it'll also be on our Twitter. Please register for the webinar even if you can't make it, and that way you'll get the automatic email with a link to the recording and playback so you can watch it the next day. So even though you can't, there's no alternative days for these. We're there at noon Eastern every Wednesday in March, that's it. But you can watch the playback, the recording later on. My brother Derek is listening, CEO at Aurora, and he had a really good question next. His was about coronavirus. Imagine that. Coronavirus is impacting supply chains on a global basis. Putting your Intel hat back on for a second, Dave, can you give an example of what a dystopia and a utopia supply chain intelligence scenario might be that we could test at G2? And I think he's sort of saying Intel Corporation, but feel free to just, abstract that beyond your non-disclosure agreements, which I'm sure are still quite effectively still in force.
Right, and of course, leave it to Derek to fling me into the fire on the most challenging question yet. so,
Yep.
so actually, I'm going to have you kind of repeat the end of that question again. He wants to hear about a dystopia, and I mean a plus and a minus scenario in relation to how coronavirus could affect supply chains.
Yeah, so can you give an example of what a dystopia and utopia supply chain intelligence scenario might be that it could be tested at G2?
All right. Well, so for instance, okay, very good question. So you have this supply chain, let's say that you own a supply chain, and whether or not it's from China to the United States or whatever, it doesn't matter now. We already see coronavirus going everywhere. But you have this supply chain. And what you can do is say, okay, now we have something like coronavirus, which can either take employees out, make them ill, or make it so that different countries are shut down as far as people coming in and out of the country, or certain types of activities are not allowed, or my company won't let me travel anymore. So this is definitely an impact to your supply chain on any way it's designed. It will affect supply chain designs differently based on how you're designed. Let's say you have one single series supply chain from New York to Paris, and you basically move things the exact same way from New York to Paris every time. Well, guess what? That coronavirus may sink you. That could be a problem because you don't have much flexibility. You don't have a dynamic or a dynamicity built into your supply chain. You don't have different pathways. You don't have different ways to get things through customs. You don't have different employees available in different parts of the country who may or may not be affected by it and therefore won't or will be sick. So in other words, you can design your system around dealing with something like a coronavirus in the future to have minimal disruption on your supply chain. And as Derek just suggested, we can also take any supply chain design now and test it against coronavirus and what would happen to you if it hit the major operational points of your supply chain.
In fact, didn't we touch on this a couple of weeks ago when you were in Milwaukee around semiconductors and the fact that there's really only about 3 or 4 semiconductor makers left who are actually fabbing, silicon?
Well, yeah, and I think Intel is the only one fabbing their own.
Yeah.
Then there's 2 major suppliers that everyone else feeds through. So,
Yep.
so if those 2 major suppliers, which are both in Asia, I think, get wiped out, then
Yeah.
Intel's the only player, and they happen to make their own. So that's problematic for secondary businesses who make semiconductors in general, and is problematic for all competitors that made their semiconductors through these two suppliers.
So we, in the promotion of this webinar, Dave, we asked a couple of rhetorical questions, and one of those rhetorical questions was, what's the probability that a global pandemic will have an impact on your business model? 100%. It's just a matter of when.
Kind
and
of like
how.
an asteroid.
It's kind of like an asteroid, yeah. And I think there are numerous examples that have varying degrees of probability that have to be factored in. But pandemic is 100%. This was inevitable. What's happening right now with the whole COVID-19 situation, and I know of people who are radically changing their plans for the next couple of months on the basis of this thing that just all of a sudden turned into a pretty important matter.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Great question, Derek, and I'm sure you'll keep asking those when we get to Madison together. I have another one here this is from Brent Leland. Any guidance
Hi,
on
Brent.
the type?
How you doing, Brent?
Any guidance on the type of problems or scenarios that we should bring to G2? It will help to narrow down the right team to bring along. And I think what he's driving at there, if I know Brent, like I think I know Brent, is what type of scenario is the most testable, and realistic? Is it just around the pandemic, example, or should we be thinking about AI/ML and how maybe we're about to make a big investment in artificial intelligence or machine learning? We're trying to decide between a couple of alternatives. Can you give a little color on how that might shake out?
Well, so you probably have input on this too, Arik, but from my point of view, your business system that you want to analyze, you need to bring people with you who understand it, right? So in other words, if you guys are all in marketing for some reason and you want to start looking at the new product development process and you don't really know anything about that product development process, it's going to be really hard for you to do it. So just like I said 2 months ago, I knew almost nothing about AI and ML. I mean, I knew some. I worked at Intel and stuff, so I wasn't completely clueless, but I still didn't really understand what it was or how it worked. I'm a systems analysis expert. I pulled together a bunch of AI and ML experts in Milwaukee on February 12th and 13th to describe it to me so I could understand what the current state is. You basically have to bring those experts with you to the business, to the G2 event that can help, that basically know your system. I'm not talking about every little nut and bolt in the system, but generally how the thing operates. So whatever you work on, make sure you bring with you the people that are somewhat familiar with how it operates and the challenges it has and how it interfaces with other parts of your system, or I should say your organization and the greater economy.
Yeah, cool. I have some thoughts too, but I'm going to save them because we've only got 2 minutes left. And
Okay.
Jonathan actually had a really good two-part question that I'm not sure you're going to be able to address the whole thing, but I'll try and get part one out and then I'll do part two. What are your views of the risks when AI and ML take over decision-making for the function of AI and ML?
Yeah. Well, of course, a lot of these trends point to very interesting scenarios, and a lot of stuff will be triggered not by technology but by policy. In other words, I read a very interesting article in Scientific America last month about why there should never be autonomous war bots that make their own decisions. Because if they make the wrong decision, we will have an instantaneous triggering of World War III if every country has their own autonomous war bots. So I think we're kind of asking questions along that same line. There has to be some kind of human input. Now, one thing I want people to understand is that our current computers work on 0-1 logic processing. Yes, no, electron here, no electron here. These are bimodal extremes, 0 and 1. There's no gray area in that computational process. While we can build super complex 0 and 1 logic engines that are black and white logic engines to appear like they're making gray area decisions, they are not. And so, first of all, we have to be very careful about asking machines to make gray area decisions. And second of all, we have to be smart about understanding their capabilities to do so. And this is where that data curation I was talking about is going to be the first biggest profit engine in AI and ML.
Yep.
People who can create data sets that produce the outputs you need. Garbage in is garbage out. So I know that I kind of spoke a little around that answer, but yeah, it's going to be quite interesting. That scenario he discussed is a possibility in the future. There's going to be a technological analysis of that, of how well that can even do it, and then a policy requirement of, do we want that to happen? Not because we're scared of it, but is that really the best thing for society?
Yep. And in fact, I'll remark that I've recently seen some editorializing out of Europe about why Europe is behind the US and China in AI. And the explanation boils down to ethics, that it has a European version of artificial intelligence research that has to be ethical in order for them to pursue it. And I've really always thought of a bipolar AI continuum between the US and China, really, because in the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time in China. China nationally wants to create a general AI that can do anything. Whereas here, the limited industrial policy that we've had in the USA has really focused on very specific point solutions for AI types of systems. And the comparison's pretty stark. It's kind of, bringing a knife to the gunfight. If we also then assume that artificial intelligence is potentially the platform for the future, Cold War and geopolitical situation, which, by the way, back to scenarios, is a big part of scenarios. The macro environmental factors going into your scenario, the dystopia, utopia, will be political, economic, social, technological, and obviously this is a big part of those macro environmental factors, legal, and ecological. So PESTLE is the acronym that you're working off of there, or STEEPLE, if you'd rather use that term. But that's really kind of the inventory of macro environmental factors that you're going to have to cope with. Let me get Jonathan's second part of his question in, and then we're already over time a couple minutes, Dave, so I'm going to try and keep that to maybe 5 minutes over so that we can cut people loose. The second part touches on some of these social and political factors. AI bias. It's a hot topic these days. Bias in, bias out. Any thoughts from a technical perspective on how that can be handled to move forward, especially when they're no longer self-contained?
Right. No, you're right. We're having big problems. We're now computerizing the previous bias of all our our previous generations. And not because we're evil, but because the data that we're feeding into the system was built under systems that had human bias already built into it. Now, again, I don't have a specific answer for this, except this is back to that data curation and the immense value add that can happen with companies that can become pro and non-biased data, not only for good decision making, but to make sure different sets of our society don't get hosed with the output. So not only for ethics, but also for making profits for your company, you need to have unbiased data sets. And so we're going to have to figure out how to do that. And this is going to be a combination of psychology, statistics, you name it. Kind of going back to data sets and jumping back to what you said about China wanting to make this universal AI engine. Well, I think that's a cool idea. That is very far away. And if you think about it, in order to have a universal AI engine, you have to have a universal data set that feeds into this universal engine. And interestingly enough, one of my predictions that I used on data for the input to these things said at some point in time, we will have one universal data set. So I just predicted that, and it just came out of your mouth that's, when you talked about a system that would need that data set, that's a ways off, and it's hard to visualize what the heck a universal data set really is. But if you had a universal AI engine, it would have to be fed with a universal data set. That's the only way to do it.
Great questions, guys. One last kind of two-part question. I'm going to try and address it really quickly so we can get out of here and cut you all loose to go on with your day. Justin asked, so I see the value of these S-curves in terms of technological aspects of the STEEP framework. Can these be applied to other areas of STEEP, such as social and economic? And I think we touched on a little bit of that just now. Do you have anything you want to kind of drill down into in terms of political, social, economic, legal, ecological? I think is a biggie.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, all S curves are actually, they look at everything. And matter of fact, the way like a new technology gets absorbed into the marketplace is just as much political because it's controlled by the other major players in the market. Electric motors versus gasoline engines is a perfect example. We could have had fully electric cars a long time ago if big oil and the auto industry didn't basically push against that in politics. So the S curves really are affected by resources, money, politics, technology, everything. And yes, I apply all these trends because the trends are actually developed for electromechanical thermal systems, which is basically like the Titanic, right? I just applied them to data sets in artificial intelligence, virtual computing systems. They were not written for that, but they work very well for that.
Yep. I think that's your pup, not mine, Dave, but he wants to go out, it sounds like. One last couple things. Justin also asked, in terms of strategic foresight, where do S-curves fit? Do they contribute to the expected future, potential future, or preferred future? I would say that as a decision maker and as an analyst, they're really all of the above. S-curves really describe how performance will be redefined by the marketplace and by users going forward. Maybe, Dave, you want to comment a little bit on that. Justin had another point in there about how the jump to new parameters of performance, which of course you didn't actually go into in this presentation, but is a very, very important part of the shift down the Z-axis into a different dimension of performance that we will touch on in the next webinar in a week.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you need to repeat, my guard dog wants to kill someone at the front door. Would you repeat what the question is I'm answering?
Where do S-curves fit in strategic foresight? Expected, potential, or preferred futures?
Expected, potential, or preferred? Preferred, I would say expected and potential. Preferred is kind of like what you decide to do with it, but they're going to tell you expected and potential.
Final questions from Edwin, and then we'll let Dave go walk his dog. Last question is from Edwin. It's about mental health, an important topic that he's concerned about. How is AI and ML impacting mental health, both in terms of privacy or expectations around privacy, and then also data that is very critical to our well-being, and having it managed somewhere else or by someone else, or having it managed in a way that may not be in our best interest?
So the question basically has to do with how can AI and ML have a negative impact on mental health?
Yes.
Well, I mean, these are some great questions, and clearly we're now getting into other areas outside of the technology, but clearly I think just like anything, it can produce opportunities and threats to mental health. If used correctly, it can be a counselor, it can be a day-to-day mentor, it can, who knows, it can give you feedback, positive feedback, it can make suggestions that you do the right thing, for your mental health. And on the same token, it can go the other way. So I think I can't really speak to this at this point just because we're now into psychology and other things, but I guarantee it can be used in both directions.
I think it's an excellent question, Edwin, to test in Madison in 6 weeks, which is going to be my final pitch for RECONVERGE G2 2020. Visit reconverge.net/agenda-2020. You'll see it on your screen there. Take a look at what we're going to be doing. What's the puppy's name, Dave? I forgot.
That was Coda. Wilfie's still about to shoot someone at the front door.
Wolfie's gonna tear somebody's face off.
Yeah.
Coda's looks like the sweet one.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for all of your
Yep.
insights today. I can't wait to see you next week. First of all, in Milwaukee, again, if you want to come to those meetings and you're in Milwaukee, send me an email. I'll see what I can do. And definitely come to Madison the end of April, folks, and meet Dave and have Dave put you through this ringer over the course of 3 days rather than 1 hour. Any final remarks, Dave?
No, that's it. I appreciate your time.
All right, everybody, we'll be sending an email out with a link to the recording for this. Be sure to be here in 167 hours now, which is next Wednesday, noon Eastern. We'll be going through programming growth strategy, and I really appreciate everybody joining today, being such a fantastic audience and all of the great questions, everybody. I hope we have more next week. Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Great job.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.